Hey, today we're talking about MIDI. More specifically, MIDI notes, like this. And this is a MIDI note. It has an on function, an off function, a note number, and a velocity for how hard you press it. There are also knobs and faders, but we'll leave those for another day. Today we're only talking about notes. So these are note values. And the thing is, we can play with our note values before they reach our instrument. So these notes are hitting this instrument. We actually have the opportunity to place things before the instrument and play with it. So right now, all of my MIDI is coming out of these machines and entering this operator or VST or drum rack. And we have the opportunity to play with that MIDI before it touches our instruments. So let's do that. All right, so check this out. For the purpose of this tutorial, we're talking mostly about MIDI, right? So the MIDI happens before our instrument. This one's operator. You can have any VST, drum rack, anything that turns a MIDI signal into sound is going to be your main instrument, right? Now, when we talk about before the instrument, you can only put MIDI effects there. So if you go over here to audio effects, like try to put a reverb beforehand, it'll say insert audio effects after instruments, because audio effects affect audio, right? So if we reverb after this operator, we're going to add some reverb to our sound. But if you go over here to MIDI effects, you can see that we have arpeggiator, chord, MIDI effect rack, note length, pitch, random, scale, velocity. Now, most people are familiar with arpeggiator. Really, really clear, cut and dry. Play a chord, and then it'll play each one of those notes individually up and down until you let go, right? That's pretty much what an arpeggiator is. We'll play with an arpeggiator later. For now, I'm going to show you pitch and scale. I find these to be super duper useful. So check this out. We're going to drag pitch down here, and we are going to drag scale down here, right? So check this out. I have this thing happening, right? Take a listen. Just something I did, right? Very simple. Now we can see when we move this pitch up and down, right? We can move that bass line up and down. Now the issue with that is that it's not always in key. Sometimes those notes are going out of key and it doesn't make sense, right? So I've got the scale here, and right now it's a straight line, so it's not really doing anything to our notation. But if we click the refresh button, this is one of the few presets in Ableton that I actually use. And you go to C minor, because I've written all of this to be in C minor, right? So now anything that passes through this module will be realigned to be in C minor. So we can take this, and this is, listen to the bass line, right? "100% in tune, in key." So that's basically the idea of pitch and scale, right? So I'm going to delete these because I actually have something saved over here. I have this in its own little module that I've made. So I can turn it on and off, and I can go up or down 7 steps, and I can choose what scale I'm in. So usually for pitch and scale, I have my entire set globally. I have one knob that controls every single one of these scale knobs. So when I put myself in F, all of my scales go to F, and they're only activated once I turn them on. So they're all off. I set them to F, and then when I press to turn all of my scale functions on, it'll turn my entire set from being whatever it was to strictly F minor. Whereas for the pitch function, I actually have my pitch function mapped separately per instrument. So say I have 7 different sounds running at the same time, 7 different instruments. They all of their scale functions are one knob on my hardware, but for each of their pitch functions, I have those mapped separately. So I can take one instrument and pitch it down by 3 steps, have another instrument pitch it up by 3 steps, and have another instrument keep it right at 0, and have them all locked into a specific key signature so I can on the fly create new sections. After this new section is created, after I have all my knobs in like their places, I can turn on my master off switch, and it turns off all of my scale functions and all of my pitch functions. So all of a sudden we're back at the original loop before we started manipulating it. So I can turn this on and off. Here's me playing around with this very idea with the push and iPad, the Nord Lead 4 rack, and the APC 4D Mark II. Check it out. All right, so here we are. I have 4 channels running to 4 different instruments, and then one percussion thing happening, and the entire loop is like 1 bar long. So it's a very short loop. Here's the first one. That's it. Here's the second one. That's it. Here's the third one. Here's the fourth one. Then some percussion. Right. So what we have here is a very, very simple MIDI loop. Up here, I have these 4 knobs that will dictate the pitch parameter of that object we were looking at a moment ago. And I can move these pitches around and turn the on and off button on and off to create new sections out of material that we've already written. Check it. So this is the loop. That's it. That's it. Now we're going to start moving this around, right? See pretty quickly we can take something that's fairly simple and turn it into something complex. Take something that we already have and create new ideas with those same written MIDI clips. All right, that was pitch and scale. I'm minimizing and turning that off, and we are adding a new module that I've been working on. The MIDI comes in over here, and it's got multiple pathways that it can take to come through to the instrument. And most of the time, the pathway I have selected is the pathway that does nothing to the MIDI. No effect. It goes straight on through. That's like the default setting, you know? As soon as we click this chain selector, we see that depending on what we have selected, the MIDI will run through a different one of these channels. So if we have the second one selected, for instance, move this over here, then the MIDI going through will have some stuff happen to it. Whereas if we choose the bridge one, a bunch of stuff will happen to it that'll like create a bunch of tension. Whereas pre will make it like a little softer, pretty much the same as main, but like a little softer, you know, kind of like an intro. Here, check it out. This is me kind of playing around with it. Okay, so same loop as last time, right? So instead of a knob for that mod, I have a list on an iPad to my left. Check this out. This is 1, right? We're on the through. MIDI's just rolling through very simple stuff, right? We're gonna click number 2 to see what happens. Then back to through. This is back to normal. Back to number 2. Let's check out number 3. So we have like a percussive change, very slight, very slight. Let's try number 4. Let's try the bridge. create something very simple. And we have the modular capability of flexing our MIDI into directions that are beneficial to us. We might as well. You feel me? So the last one was pretty fun, right? The main idea is that I use mostly standard Ableton stuff plus the Max for Live delay that you see over here. I think this thing is so useful. It's called Note Echo when you go to your Max for Live stuff. And the way that I have them arranged is different per instrument. Like my instrument 1, I usually use a bass, like a monophonic bass on my 1 instrument, and 2 will be chords. So on the second one, you'll see it says chords mod. So this one is more of like some modular stuff that I would do to some chords. And on the inside, it's all pretty simple stuff. There's some like randomization stuff happening, some note delays, some things, you know, and it's different per instrument. If you'd like to know more about this, leave a comment. Otherwise, you can subscribe on Patreon, subscribe on Twitch. I'm making this whole set available to you so you can have these, download them. It's all internal Ableton stuff anyway, so you can load it right on up and you can play around with them. They're super fun. All right, so there are 2 other things that I have before my instruments, and then we have our percussion that we're going to go through. So hang in there with me. I'm going to be pretty quick with these ones. They're pretty simple for the most part. This chord selector, I usually have it on, and I have it automatically selecting the through chain. And in the through chain, there are no MIDI effects going on. So the MIDI passes straight through. But as soon as we change it, let's say we put it on the second chain, you see the second chain is labeled major 7th. It has this chord function on it and then a scale on it. And this scale is mapped to the same hardware knob that all of my other scale functions are mapped to. So when we start activating the chord selector, we're automatically going to be in the scale that we have chosen. And this is made to, for the most part, to press one note and then it multiplies that note to create these chords, you know? So that should be a 4. Yeah, that makes sense. So we can create chords out of one note. So if we have a melody playing, we can potentially turn it into a chord progression. And it's still experimental. Feel free to play with it if you like. I have a lot of fun with it. I think it's super, super great. And then we have this arpeggiator rack, which is very straightforward. Arpeggiator on, off, and then you can change all the rates and stuff. I'd recommend playing with it yourself, seeing what kind of experimenting you can do with it. And that's pretty much all I have for my instrument MIDI manipulation. All right, so for my percussion, I've set up a very simple loop to kind of show you what's happening here. Check it out. I'm gonna press play. Right, very, very simple. Now you can see here we have 2 clips playing on kit. They're called kit control channels. And what they're actually doing is sending MIDI to this kit channel over here. Now, the reason why I'm sending them from 2 channels over to 1 channel to be triggered on my main channel is for several reasons. The first reason being when I play these, I can turn them off and I retain my tails of my percussion that's happening. I retain my running audio as I turn off the MIDI while the audio is still playing out. Whereas if I were to have these MIDI clips on actual percussion channels, it would sound more like this. And when I turn it off, it cuts it off and we no longer hear the tails. Now this is a bummer for me. I don't like the way it sounds, and when I turn off my MIDI clips, those channels, I can stop the MIDI from running to my drum machine, and it creates a much more authentic, genuine drum machine kind of feel, you know? So in order for me to be able to play these channels like drum machines and use the drum machine sequencers and all of that the push plays with, I have to drag an actual drum machine onto these channels. Now the thing is, this is a dummy drum machine. There are no clips on it. There's nothing. So as I'm playing this, I trigger absolutely nothing on this drum machine, but I need this drum machine to be here. Now the problem that happens then is that my MIDI is no longer able to be sent from this channel to this channel via Ableton's normal routing procedures that you do all in here, you know? Because now all of a sudden I don't have a MIDI 2 like these other MIDI channels. You see MIDI 2 and you choose a channel and it goes there. I have audio 2 because it thinks that my drum machine is outputting audio, and then it's asking me where I'd like this drum machine audio to go to. But this drum machine is a dummy drum machine. There's no audio coming out of it. So instead, what I have to do, I have this mid-dream send module right here. And I actually have a whole bunch of these that you're going to be getting with this in the download. So please download this set. There's a bunch of goodies in it. This mid-dream send and receive, right? So this is basically a MIDI through, because the mid-dream send, any MIDI coming in will go into the send and then travel into the quantum realm or the Max for Live realm, whatever, and then come out of the MIDI receive. And I have 8 of these, right? So for each of these, they're all numbered together, no matter where they are in the Ableton set. If you send MIDI in to mid-dream send 1, it'll come out of mid-dream receive 2. So this is very useful because over here we have mid-dream send 1 at the beginning of this track. Great news. So now when we make MIDI happen here in our little clip, it's going to go into this instead of into this, and the MIDI is going to send to wherever 2 is. And 2, thankfully, the receive 1 and the receive 2, because there's send 1 here and then there's send 2 here. The receives to those are at the beginning of my kit channel. So now we have enabled our MIDI to send from our kit control channels into our actual percussion channel. And there's one more thing that's important with these kit control channels. We need to have this green switch, and this will be included also. It's a free Max for Live device. You can download it off the Max for Live library. And what this basically does is every time I turn off the channel switch on this, it also turns off the accompanying every other device on the channel. So this stops us from sending MIDI. This is very, very useful. So every time we turn it off, we're no longer sending MIDI to this channel, and we get a note off function for any hanging notes. It's very, very useful. I recommend it for a bunch of other uses as well. This is where I'm playing with it. So now that we have our MIDI coming out of here, and we've figured all that out to go into the kits channel, and this is all so that we can preserve our tails as we turn our MIDI functions on and off, right? Now our MIDI has arrived at our drum machine channel. This is pretty cool. There are a few things here. It's pretty straightforward. Here's our drum mod. So like before, when I was clicking to have like mod 1, mod 2, here's the bridge section, here's the pre section for my instruments to like create new sections on the fly. And this is the same thing. When I click it starts on the through, and then I've got a bunch of other stuff that can happen here. So I can make the kick into a kick and snare. I can add a hi-hats based on other notes. I'll show you how this sounds in a quick moment here. Super duper fun. So it's the drum mod. And then there's the, let's see, what else do we have here? The low brow. What does this do? Low brow removes everything but the kick and the snare and the hi-hat, I think. So it removes all of the crashes and the cymbals and stuff like that. It's a quick switch to take out all of my cymbals and crashes and rides and elongated stuff. So it makes it more like jungly feeling, because there's no metal. It's all like hollow hit drums. And then we have over here, let's see, what is this? Drum mod, kick solo. This one's super fun. So the kick solo is something. And the kick solo is a is a rack that only allows through the notes that will eventually trigger kick drums. So if I turn this on, it will essentially mute everything except for the kick drums. That's super fun. We really, really like that. So if we'd ever like to, no matter what's going on, just only have the kick drum, we can click this and we know that we will only get kick drums happening. Super, super useful. We also have the kick mute. This is super fun. So it allows every note through except for the kicks. So now we have everything else and we just move our kick out. And this includes any kicks that are being utilized for side chaining. All of that goes out. So it changes the mix very dynamically for a live situation. Super duper fun. And then we have my actual percussion chain, right? So there are a few things happening here. In my actual chain, there are many more kits here. I actually have 4 kits total, and I'll give you my 4th kit. This is unmixed, so the percussive hits are going to be at different volumes. You're going to have to change the volumes yourself, but to see how I organize it is very important. All of my kick drums are always in the bottom left, right? Whereas all my snare drums are usually over here toward the right. Like these 3 are usually snares, and then I have this one being like a clap, this one being like a side stick, this being a secondary kick, this one being an open hi-hat, closed hi-hat. Up here we have crashes and rides, and then some kind of shaker, some kind of sound effect kind of thing, some tom kind of stuff, maybe some vocal snippets. And I keep all of my kits organized the same exact way, because as the MIDI is going to my drum kit, I need to know what note is going to trigger what. No matter what drum machine it's going to, I need to be able to know and predict what's going to happen with that note. So I can never have random samples all over the place. Like, I need to be organized with where my samples are being placed. So I've chosen to organize them like this. And you can organize it the same way if you like. I recommend it. I think it's great. And there's also, so like usually I would have a chain selector, right? And I'll show you in a second over here what happens when I select the different chains. But you see, like, I would have one kit and then a secondary kit, a tertiary kit, and then my 4th kit over here. And I would choose between the kits and I would play one at a time. So I can play in a bunch of MIDI, put on all my effects, and then swap kits using the same MIDI information and just funnel it to a different drum machine instead, you know? And at the same time, this chain is always selecting my side chain, because I side chain to a kick that's actually muted. So you see how no matter what we have selected on my chain, our side chain is always selected. So our notes are always going into my side chain, and there's actually a kick in here that's pretty good for side chaining. And everything in my set is side chained to this one kick. Not the kicks in my actual drum machines, but this one muted kick, because it's very useful. It sounds good, and I can do a bunch of effects on my actual percussion that you hear, and have my side chain still thumping if I choose to. And that's super, super fun. I really, really enjoy that. Another great reason to have a specific kick for side chaining is sometimes I'll have like 808s bumping or something as my kicks. And if I have an 808 going on, then it's going to be really hard to effectively side chain to that, because the 808 is so loud to begin with, and it stays very loud. It's a very meaty kick. So it's kind of hard to side chain to sometimes. So it's kind of nice to have a different kick to always be side chaining to. I find it to be very, very useful. So eventually my MIDI makes it all the way out into my percussion, and then stuff after that. I'll have some stutter effects, some audio effects, but that's all audio effect after that. We're talking purely MIDI today. And that is essentially my entire drum rack. Check it out. Here's me playing with it a little bit. All right, so here's our percussion. Very simple, right? Number one most important thing is that we can turn it off and retain our tails. Super important. Super duper important. Now let's check out our different mod features. Check it. Right now we're on a through. Everything's normal. I'm gonna turn on some stuff. Here's number 2. I have some knobs on number 2 that I can actually move around. add stuff without having to do stuff. I can be over here playing piano. Right? I can be doing things. So I have effects that we can, so like this one, it's taken out our kick and has made it into one of the other notes and retimed it to do something. So these are great ways to play with this stuff. You can move everything a certain direction. So this is still the same percussion. I've yet to change the MIDI. So I can be playing with other synths and flick my hand over here to do something to create a whole new percussive section and turn it all off, right? We can go and all of a sudden be back right where we started, or run right back here. So this is pretty much the end of it. I got a few things for you though. There's this thing called every other mid dream, right? Because everything that we've done here so far is taking a very simple line and algorithmically making it more complex in a predictable fashion so that we can play with it musically. Now, sometimes we get a little too complex. A lot of notes are happening at the same time. Like some of those drum things that you were hearing were maybe a little too complex in there. So there's this thing that I made in collaboration with Monono. Anyway, check them out down in the link below. They're great. They're on Twitch. They also do electronic music. They helped me make this machine, and I think it's super, super fun. What it essentially does is it says every time you play a note, the next time that specific note is played, it will not be played instead. And then the third time that note is played, it will be played. So if you play a D1, and then every other note, and then you play a D1 again, it will not play the D1. It will mute instead. It will not play anything at all. It'll ignore the note. And then the next time you play a D1, it will play it. Then the next time you play a D1, it won't play it. And it applies for every single note on the keyboard individually. And it's super, super fun. So when you get super complex with all of these things happening, you can then strip down and then get complex on top of that again if you like. And that is it, I think. If I missed anything, please ask me a question. Comments, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on Spotify. Please follow me on Spotify. I make a lot of music. I'm on Twitch. Subs on Twitch and subs on Patreon get to download this project and all the goodies inside of it on the respective platforms. Please join my Discord. I'm in Discord. If you've got questions, I can answer them in Discord. Downloads in Discord. And yeah, appreciate y'all watching this. If you made it from beginning to end on this, then good job. Like if you can follow my MIDI pathway all the way through and understand how that works, good job, because it gets pretty complex in there. So yeah, I hope to see y'all on the next one. Yeah, please like, subscribe, all the stuff. Catch you next time.